This is the first week of the NBA season. There's already been a bunch of great games. I took Knox, my oldest, and Jason to the Nets game last night against the Pelicans. And I'm coming off a first take appearance yesterday where Stephen A says the Nets are going to the finals. I would never judge a team one game in, and they're missing Seth Curry and Joe Harris. But there's still just something missing from that team, and I don't necessarily mean personnel. I mean the spirit. I thought the Pels looked great. We're going to get into our playoff seedings in a second, but I'm high on the Pelicans this year.
So, how much of the Pelicans' 130 points is the Pelicans with the combination of Zion and BI taking a jump and everything? The Pelicans' potency offensively, and how much of it the Nets just not playing defense?
Well, the Nets weren't a great defensive team last year. You add Royce O'Neal, you add Ben Simmons on the perimeter. You hope you're a little bit better. Kevin Durant made some phenomenal defensive plays last night, including meeting BI at the rim for a great block. But there's something about bigger teams. Valanciunas last night, Zion, of course. They just killed that team on the boards, and that's where I think. Look, I don't know what that means in the playoffs. If you're going against a Giannis and Brook Lopez, or you're going against Joel Embiid, but there's some mass down low that team is missing right now.
Yeah, and what did you think? You've obviously played with Zion. How did you think he looked? What did you think? Was there any rustiness? Was there anything that sort of?
I mean, look, he looked like Zion. He looked bouncy. There was a couple times he got his own miss. That second jump is special. I saw the force. I saw this. I mean, he looked like Zion. He looked like someone who is in shape and fit and ready to go. The other guy we should shout out, just honestly, because he's part of the brotherhood. But number 1 overall pick, Paolo Banchero last night with 27 points in his debut. He's the first guy. This is crazy. He's the first guy since LeBron in 2003 to go for at least 25, 5, and 5 in his debut. Looked every bit of a number 1 overall pick.
And a poster.
Yeah, and a sick poster.
Night one.
And this week's guest, of course, Donovan Mitchell had a big game. We'll get into a bunch of stuff with him. Don had 31 last night in a loss to the Raptors, and I think that should lead us right into some of our picks here. Our very early, having seen one game.
Well, we have to say we made these picks
last weekend.
We made these picks last weekend before any of the games, and we're not going to change any of the picks based off anything that has happened, obviously.
No. So
they're already set in stone.
All right, I'm going to go through the Western Conference first, and then we'll go through your Western Conference picks, and we can talk about that. All right, so Golden State, LA Clippers, 3 Memphis Grizzlies, 4 Phoenix Suns, 5 Pelicans, 6 Nuggets, 7 Dallas, 8 Minnesota, play-ins 9 Lakers, 10 Blazers.
Okay.
Your picks?
1 Golden State, 2 Denver, 3 Phoenix, 4 Minnesota, 5 Clippers, 6 Pelicans, 7 Memphis, 8 Dallas, 9 Lakers, 10 Portland.
Okay. All right. So a couple of things. A couple of teams I want to highlight here. So let's talk about the Nuggets real quick because you have them high. I saw Mike Prada had them at number 1. I think he had them winning 58 games. Came across my timeline the other day. For them to finish that high, the assumption is that Jamal Murray is the Jamal Murray pre-injury, and that Michael Porter Jr. is Michael Porter Jr. pre-injury.
Yes.
And I believe Mike Malone has already come out and said that Murray's minutes initially may be monitored and restricted a little bit. They got killed by the Jazz last night. The Jazz.
They did get smacked by a team that's trying to lose.
I'm not going to, again, nothing off one game. I said in the newsletter, it's crazy to get those guys back and have them in the 6th seed where they finished last year, with Jokic basically carrying that team to the playoffs and rightfully so winning the MVP. I think the Western Conference is harder this year because of Zion being back, Pelicans getting that valuable playoff experience last year. The Memphis Grizzlies, to me, I know you have them lower. You have them 7.
7.
I have them 3. The Grizzlies, to me, have an identity. They have a spirit. They have their core group back. Some of that depth they have with DeAnthony Melton going to the Sixers, Kyle Anderson signing with Minnesota, some of that may hurt. But Zaire Williams could potentially fill that role that those guys played. So I just think the Grizzlies are going to be great. And then the Clippers. How do you have the Clippers 5? Well, explain the rationale.
Here's the thing: we didn't do playoff picks and we didn't do finals picks. I think the Clippers are going to the finals. I'm not going to say the Clippers are going to win the finals. I think they're going to the finals. I don't think that they are going to finish in the top 4 because I don't think those guys are going to play that much.
Okay.
I think they all, and you know that with the guys in that team. You know how they're going to set their minutes up, and it's not really going to matter how they're doing. They're just going to sit. They're going to sit at various points. They're going to have 5 rest days a month or whatever it is. And like to our point earlier, there's no off nights in the West. So when they sit, they're not going to win. I mean, that's not a team you want to run into in the post. My question for you about Memphis, there's 2 teams I wanted to ask you about, Memphis and Dallas. Dallas obviously got to the conference finals last year. I have them 8. What do you have them, 7?
I have them 7, yeah.
Yes. Do you think, we were talking about this with Jason earlier, who's biased, obviously. I think they lost their second best player, came to New York, for a friend of the show. And I don't think that they have anyone who can replace him, at least right away. Do you think there's any reason for optimism that they could potentially be better than they were last year?
Again, it goes back to believing that the Western Conference is better. We still haven't really talked about Minnesota. We may get there in a second. Denver being better, the Clippers being better. I don't know that Dallas on paper got that much better. Tim Hardaway Jr. coming back is great for them, and I think he was missed last year. His shooting, his scoring, he's a spark plug. He starts, he comes off the bench, but he's going to take 12 to 18 shots. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to give you floor spacing. I don't think they're going to be better. I don't. I think the Western Conference is better, and that's really what we keep running into. Here's an interesting thing, actually. Okay, so according to DraftKings, right, Luka is the odds-on favorite to win MVP. He's at plus 425. Those are his odds right now. I don't see a scenario, and by the way, I believe he's been the odds-on favorite for a couple years running now.
Yeah.
I don't see a scenario. I don't care what kind of numbers he puts up, unless they end up being a top 3 seed in the West. I don't see him winning MVP. And I'll tell you why. Hold on. I'll tell you why. Because I think you have the Warriors 1, I have the Warriors 1. What does that mean? That means Steph Curry is probably in the running for MVP. It means Steph Curry
Did we not have this exact fight about Jokic last year? About Jokic winning MVP?
Yeah.
On a mediocre team?
Okay, but what he did, okay, fine. If Luka Doncic breaks every single advanced stat record, then yeah, okay, he's in the 7 seed. We can talk about that. I'm not questioning whether or not Luka is an MVP caliber player.
I was just gonna say
I think this thing runs in cycles. It's like when Russ won in
the year after KD.
The year after KD, right?
Yeah.
They ended up with a 6 seed. He won first, triple, averaging a triple-double since Oscar Robertson. The other thing I wanted to mention, because you brought up the Clippers, and I don't know why you have them 5th, but they are the favorites to win the Pacific Division, despite the Warriors being the defending champions. Of course, the Warriors are the 2nd. The Clippers are also the odds-on favorite at plus 320 to win the Western Conference this year. I think everybody's pretty high on the Clippers.
I was going to say, are you a little surprised by that? I mean, we know how good Kawhi is. John has looked good so far, but it's also like these guys haven't played together, so there is going to be a feeling out period.
Some of this is the depth, the size, the length. They have one of the greatest shooters in the NBA right now, in Luke Kennard. Like, to me, they're a complete team, and they have guys that buy in and can play.
Great coach.
They have guys that buy in, like that run they made when I was in Dallas. Like, Patrick Beverley ended up not playing for part of the series, and obviously he's not on the team anymore, but Ty Lue gets those guys to buy in. Speaking of DraftKings, right now everyone can earn up to a 100% boost with DraftKings stepped up same game parlays. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, opt in, and place a stepped up same game parlay today. If you don't already have an account, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and sign up with promo code JJ and boost your winnings up to 100%. That's code JJ only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details.
We both have the Pelicans in top. You have the Pelicans 6 or 5?
5.
I have the Pelicans 6. I have the Clippers 5, Pelicans 6.
Yep.
Even after last night, is there a world where we think there's going to be this is a team, obviously that made the playoffs last year, but they really turned it on at the end. Is there going to be a feeling out period for them, especially defensively? There's an incredible amount of talent on that roster, but do you think we may be overhyping them a little bit?
Well, it's a good question. And obviously with Valanciunas, they're primarily going to play drop coverage. It will be interesting to me as the season progresses how teams attack Zion on that end and what kind of coverage Willie Green opts for when they use Zion's man and pick and roll. Last night, they had him a little bit on Ben. They had him a little bit on Royce O'Neal. And I think Zion has the option, though, of playing in more of a hedge, which nobody does anymore, playing in more of a hedge coverage versus switching or in drop. And I think that's matchup dependent. So that's one thing to watch is Zion's sort of pick and roll coverage, how they deal with matchup hunting against him on the defensive end. But I think Willie is a smart coach. Having a guy like Larry Nance come off the bench and being able to switch 1 through 5, that's a luxury to have in certain lineups. I think you're right, though. I think defensively is sort of the big question mark with the Pelicans, and for them to end up being a top 4 seed, they probably have to have a top 10 to 12 defense, which I think is capable of doing. Hey, let's move to the Eastern Conference. Let's move to the Eastern Conference. Why don't you give us your picks? We have some disagreements here.
So I got Philly 1, Milwaukee 2, Miami 3, Brooklyn 4, Cleveland 5, Boston 6, Toronto 7, Hawks 8. And then I will grant it. I picked the Knicks and Detroit in the play-in. There's an oversight. I should have had the Bulls instead of Detroit.
Okay.
So the Bulls are going to be in the play-in, I think, with the Knicks. I don't think the Bulls are going to make the top 8.
Okay. So I had Boston 1, Milwaukee 2, Philly 3, Heat Culture 4, Nets 5, Cleveland 6, Raptors 7, Bulls 8, Hawks 9, which every statistical model has them winning a lot of games. Their over-under on DraftKings is very high. I think Kevin Pelton's model has them a 75% chance of winning the division over the Heat. And then I got Knicks 10. Explain the Boston 6 pick.
I basically think right now from the latest reports, we're probably not going to see Robert Williams till January, February, something like that. I think there's a decent chance the defense falls off. Not falls off a cliff, but falls off. And I think the East, this is what's been weird about these picks. The East is really good.
Yeah.
Again, you're in a situation where, there are teams that might have been easy wins last year that are not going to be easy wins this year, including some of the younger teams. And I think the margin for error for them is going to be a lot smaller. And if Williams is there, that's a top 3 team. Again, but we just don't know. I think we talked about it a lot about how important he is, and I just think that will be a.
So my only argument against that is at the end of last season he was out for an extended period of time, and that defense held up. And if you watch that first game, and obviously we made these picks before the first game against Philadelphia. If you watch that first game, whether it was Noah Vonleh, whether it was Blake, Al Horford, they have so much size at every position and length with Tatum and Brown. Smart coming down to double. I thought their schemes in game 1 against the Sixers were really good. They were mixing up when they came on the double. Sometimes it was early, sometimes it was late, sometimes it was on the dribble. And I think that level, I saw some, we call it scrams, where a guard ends up on Joel and the weak side comes over, the guard scrams out, gets back to the weak side corner. They don't have that matchup issue anymore. To me, this team is battle tested. They're hungry. I don't know, and I can't speak on what the effect of losing Ime Udoka and bringing in Joe Mazzulla, but I was impressed with the scheme and how they played. I thought their movement offensively, too, was great.
I will say, this is a good example of we're standing by our picks. If I'd made these picks after Tuesday night, I don't think I would have had Boston at
Did
6.
you forget that they made the finals last year?
No,
So
I basically think, and I thought the Brogdon pickup was great too, and we can talk about that impact. I thought the Brogdon pickup was great too, but I think that they were so locked in, and maybe I'm giving too much credit to Ime. I think they were so locked in defensively. They made such a turn the second half of last year going into the playoffs that it just felt like one of those things that, if you don't have that defensive anchor, if you don't have the coach who helped turn this defense around, it's not that they're all of a sudden not going to make the playoffs and going to be a bad team, but that may cost them 8 or 9 wins.
Right. Okay, that's fair. A couple teams that I sort of, again, you don't know the injuries that are going to happen throughout a season. A couple teams that I'm like oddly high on, but I don't have a way to justify putting them higher in my preseason predictions is the Cavs and the Toronto Raptors. Again, I personally, and there's a lot of owners and GMs that don't believe in this shit. I personally believe in continuity, and I personally believe in building an identity and a culture. I talked about that with Memphis. I think Toronto has that. I think Nick Nurse has done that in Toronto. Masai has done a good job of building out that roster, drafting well. I really like their team. For both those teams, I think the ceiling is lower maybe this year and could be higher in years to come. And that's similar to the T-Wolves. Like when we start talking about young players potentially making big jumps like we saw from Ja Morant last year, we talk about Anthony Edwards with the T-Wolves, Evan Mobley with the Cavs, Scotty Barnes with the Raptors. Like those teams' ceilings, to me, are dependent upon those guys making that Ja Morant, year 2 or year 3 leap that we saw last year.
I was going to ask you about Scotty in particular and what you think his ceiling is, because I can just say anecdotally, I feel like anytime we talk to another player around the league, that's a guy they are constantly hyping up. Everyone is like, he's the truth. No matter like teammate, non-teammate, whether they know him or anything like that, there's a constant level of praise. And I mean, we don't know for sure this is the case, but there are a lot of reports that Toronto was not interested in trading him for KD, for example. So clearly they value him in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, his ceiling is an all-NBA player. To me, the shooting, he's got to become a better three-point shooter. I'll give him a little bit of a pass. There's some people on NBA Twitter that are like, Scotty Barnes is an overrated defender. He looks like a defender, but he's not a defender. And look, he was a rookie last year. There's a big learning curve in the NBA. So the capability of being is blasphemous, absolutely blasphemous. But the capability of like being a Kawhi, I mean, Kawhi is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan mid-range, incredibly efficient, great defender. Like, Kawhi is one of the best players ever, obviously. I don't know that Scotty Barnes will end up being as good as Kawhi, but if he becomes a better shooter and locks in on that defensive end, because he's already got, like, his playmaking is great. They can basically play him as a point forward at times. And that's the one thing I didn't watch a ton of college basketball. I was surprised by that. For a rookie, his feel for the game, his passing, it's high level. And I think he fits with those guys in Toronto because it's a smart group. It's a smart group.
Especially at that size and how physical he is. I'm curious what you think about Miami.
Yeah, I mean, no one talks about Miami. No one talked about them last year. They were the #1 seed. People thought it was like a fluke thing, and they're one shot away from getting the NBA Finals for the second time in 3 years. Again, I literally... on my notes in the newsletter, I had a little write-up on every team. And on the Miami Heat, who I picked 4th in the East, I just wrote #Heat culture. I'm a believer. And so maybe they're higher than 4. I know how Jimmy works. I know his mindset. He's going to come back better. Tyler Hero is going to come back better. He's a worker. I've said this. We just talked about a bunch of teams and sort of their ceiling hinging on one thing or another. as good as Bam is, I would like to see night to night him establish himself a little bit more offensively. But some of that is some of that is how the Heat play. You know, it's I don't want to call it like socialist, but you know, night to night, like we don't necessarily need to go, this guy's going to get this amount of shots and touches. This guy's going to, they just play basketball.
Yeah.
And so I think Bam's inconsistency, because he averaged whatever, 19 last year. I think some of the night to night stuff with him is a byproduct of how the Heat play.
Do you think that depth is partially why they finished first in the East last year and will help them this year in terms of just like, you know, they don't need Jimmy to play every night. They don't need Bam to play every night because they go 10, 11 deep.
Yeah, I mean, that's good organizations and good rosters. That's how they're built. You gotta have some wiggle room to offset a guy spraining an ankle or having a sore knee or pulling a hamstring for a couple weeks. And the best organizations and the best teams are built that way.